In chapter 11, it starts off, it says, the whole earth was of one language and one speech, and it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, go to, and let's build a city and a tower, whose top may reach into the heavens, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered upon the face of the whole earth. And the Eternal came down to see the city and the tower, and the children of men build it. And the Lord beheld, the people as one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Did you hear that? Nothing will be restrained from them, that they have imagined to do. That indicates technology. This tower over here that we're talking about over here, it's got something to do with technology. And the people wanted to build this lest they be scattered upon the whole land, or scattered over the whole earth. Scattered. Not civilized or unified, but rather scattered in individual tribes. That indicates they had a worldwide civilization. That's what we have today, a worldwide civilization. And the powers that be want to unite this worldwide civilization under one government. Well, Nimrod had the whole world, the whole civilized world, united under one world government. And this is about 3,000, well, it's not 3,000 because the flood occurred about 2369 BC. 2369 to 2368 is the year of the flood, near as I can reckon based upon Ivan Panin's calculations. So when this guy uses the number about 3,000 years ago, after the flood, within a couple of hundred years, these people now, 8 people have multiplied. How long does it take 8 people to multiply? Well, I don't know how many children they had, and I don't know how their birth rate was, but if you take 8 people, that's 3 women. If these 3 women are having a baby every 2 or 3 years, and they live for 600 years, I mean, we're talking about each one of these families over here in 100 years' time having several hundred people or several hundred babies. These people mature in about 30 years. And so, you know, you start looking at the geometric progression. It goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. By the time you multiply this 32 times, just to give you an illustration, you know, if you think that 8 people can't produce 1 million or 2 or 5 million population in a couple 300 years, you haven't done your arithmetic. If you were to take 1 and double it to 2, and then take 2 and double it to 4, and 4 and double it to 8, and you do that 32 times, you got 40 million. If the doubling time, and we can just pick a number over here, you know, is 30 or 40 years. If we can double every 30 years, well, we can double 3 times in a century, 6 times in 2 centuries. You know, in about 5 or 6 centuries, we can have several million people. Now, just test it, do the arithmetic, and I think you'll be amazed. It's called geometric progression. Evidently, at the Tower of Babel, we're talking about civilization. Now, we're talking about maybe 200, 300 years, 400 years after the flood, we get to the Tower of Babel. How many people are extant? Could be several 100,000, could be several million. Now, with several million people spread around the world, because we have aluminum in Peru. Remember the last program? We got aluminum. Aluminum wasn't discovered until 1804. We weren't able to make aluminum until this century. For practical purposes, we were not able to make aluminum until the 20th century. Even though it had been discovered, you know, 100 years before, it was a novelty. They're taking up aluminum foil in Peru. They're digging up aluminum cups in Pakistan out of burial tombs. Boys and girls, aluminum is high technology. All right, so now, if we've got aluminum and we've got electricity, there isn't any doubt about what we got electricity. Hell, we got the batteries, for crying out loud, that came out of Babylon. We have electroplating in metallurgy. The last program I told you about metallurgy, I don't think I got to the electroplating. You know, if you go into a tomb and you pull out an artifact and the artifact is electroplated, you say, oh my God, these people have advanced metallurgy and they have electricity, for crying out loud. Well, how in the hell else do you get metallurgy with electroplating? And we didn't know how to do that until the last 100 years or so. And we call ourselves modern and sophisticated and advanced. So now when we talk about the use of radioactivity, the very first sentence over here, in the tombs of the pharaohs, the pitch used to preserve corpses contained high radioactive substances. The cloth used for swathing is radioactive. The burial chambers were probably full of radioactive dust. Perhaps the priests made use of this to protect the tombs from desecrators, or more likely insects and bacteria. You know, those mummies last for thousands of years. You got to get rid of the bacteria. That's what we're talking about today. We want to take our hamburger and we want to nuke it so that we can kill all the bacteria and eliminate E. coli. I mean, we're just getting to the point where we're, waking up to the fact that if you want to kill bacteria, you can do it with radioactivity. Now, I hadn't heard this story before. But more importantly, and the significance of this is absolutely world-shaking, researchers have recently unlocked a time capsule, a number of documents buried in incomprehensible terms until our day. When translated in the last century, they were not understood, nor could they be until modern knowledge caught up with former knowledge and then was able to recognize it. These very ancient documents contain what is now startlingly familiar language. Their contents are very alarming. Now, here are eyewitness reports that raise the compelling question. Did nuclear war wipe out sections of the civilized world in the 3rd millennium BC? In ancient documents in India, dated back to 2449 BC, an Indian text recounts in detail how aircraft were used to launch a weapon that devastated 3 cities. The record is unnervingly similar to an eyewitness report of an atomic bomb explosion, because it describes the brightness of the blast, the column of smoke rising from the blast, the fallout from the blast, intense shock waves and heat waves, the appearance of the victims, and the effects of radiation poisoning. Now, there's a document that is in our hands today from India describing the brightness of the blast, the column of rising smoke, the fallout, the intense shock waves and heat waves, the appearance of the victims, and the effects of the radiation poisoning. Who in the hell could have understood that document 100 years ago? Not until we actually saw a nuclear explosion could we have comprehended what this is talking about. Furthermore, the historical text states that an iron thunderbolt contained the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rose in all of its splendor. Clouds roared upward. Blood-colored clouds swept down onto the earth. Fierce winds began to blow. Elephants miles away were knocked off their feet. The earth shook, scorched by the terrible violent heat of this weapon. Corpses were so burnt that they were no longer recognizable. Hair and nails fell out. Pottery broke without cause. Birds were turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. Thousands of war vehicles fell down on all sides. Thousands of corpses burnt to ashes. Never before have we seen such an awful weapon, and never before have we heard of such a weapon. The war zone was the upper regions of the Ganges, and passages from this ancient Sanskrit text, which is called and I can't pronounce this word, but I'll spell it for you, Mahabharata, Mahabharata, are a nerve chiller, and the cold terror of the survivors still lives in its pages. So until we started to experiment with radioactive substances, no person on Earth could have described radiation sickness, for the simple reason that such a disease did not exist. And yet radiation sickness in clinical detail is being described here. The hair loss, vomiting, weakness, and eventual death. Classic symptoms of radiation poisoning. And more significantly, it states that one could save himself by removing all metal from his person and immersing himself in the water of rivers. The reason can only be in order to wash away contaminated particles. The exact procedure that we follow today when we're submitted to or subjected to radiation fallout. So, in Babylonia, the Gilgamesh epic recounts a day when the heavens cried out, the earth bellowed an answer, lightning flashed forth, fire flamed upwards, it rained down death. The brightness vanished, the fire was extinguished, everyone who was struck by the lightning was turned to ashes. In Tibet, and in the Gobi, and in Mongolia, the Tibetan stanzas of Dzyan, depict a holocaust engulfing 2 warring nations who engaged in aerial warfare, utilizing blinding rays, spheres of flame, shining darts, and lightning. The nations were the dark-faced and the yellow-faced, the Mongolians of the Gobi civilization. A few of the yellow-faced escaped the flooding and nuclear destruction, but the dark-faced appear to have been annihilated. The straight-eye people of Europe and the Middle East were among the survivors, apparently having been also involved in this nuclear conflict. Mexico. Ancient Mayan texts describe the destructive effects, unfortunately quite recognizable to us after Hiroshima, of a fire from the sky that put out eyes and decomposed flesh and entrails. Great cities to the north, for example in the USA, were destroyed. Canada. Canadian Indians speak of men who flew upon the skies and had shining cities and grand homes to the south. Then an enemy nation came, and there was terrible destruction. All life in the cities was gone. Nothing but silence remained. The Hopi Indians in the southwestern United States recount that some of these of the Third World flew in a great city, or to a great city, attacked it, and returned so quickly that the inhabitants did not know where their attackers came from. Soon many nations flew to attack one another, so corruption and destruction came. Physical evidence. In Gabon, West Africa, there are remains of a prehistoric nuclear chain reaction that cannot be explained by natural means.